Monsignor Irwin, thank you very much for agreeing to sit down and answer a few questions about the topic of ecologically informed theological education. I'd like to just start by asking you first, what are the challenges that Laudato Si offers to seminary and theological curricula?
Well, Laudato Si is a highly complex, dense document, very comprehensive, and it has many, many aspects. So it's not really digestible into one size fits all or a course or whatever. It's really meant to permeate a curriculum. So it really is going to require a conversion on the part of professors and students to see this as part of all of their subjects in the curriculum itself. For example, the document talks about Trinitarian communion. And the question is, well, how does that fit into a course on Trinity, on Christology? It speaks about my field of sacramentality and liturgy. Well, how does the doctrine of sacramentality get raised up in a course like the courses that we teach? Another example where I come from is a course in the Eucharist. And in light of Laudato Si, I would spend more time now talking about the gifts of creation, the manufacture of bread and wine, the process of making bread and wine as integral to the Eucharist, and probably less time on 9th century Eucharistic controversies, especially because they got kicked off to the 12th century. I think that's an example of how Laudato Si could be very influential on a curriculum. At the same time, I'm well aware of the fact that curricula are very, very tight, and a lot of disciplines have to be taught in seminary. So I think part of the challenge is also how to do this in a way that puts it inside other courses and doesn't make it another burden for the curricula.
What is the relationship of faith and science in the Laudato Si?
The Pope was very clear, as this document is written, that he wanted to make sure that we saw the relationship between the Pontifical Academy of Science, begun in the 16th century and still existing in Rome, and the qualitative work and respect for science would be into this document. And one of his concerns was to work with the people there, Archbishop Sorondo, in terms of making sure that the best scientists were involved in consultations with the document, and the best of science would be respected. So that of course for the Catholic Church is a very important statement to make, and a very important project to be involved in, given the scientific consciousness of our world, and very often people separate faith and science. This is another document in terms of, in line with John Paul's genius of integrating a number of things, but this is hard science, hard data, incorporated into a document, and then respect for the fact that that data can evolve and more research can be done. And it's quite a contribution in terms of again, this comprehensive document. It's theological, it's attuned to science, it's attuned to spirituality, attuned to liturgy and sacraments, biblical studies, all of it together, but faith and science is written in several times in the document.
What is the state of teaching science in seminaries today?
Interesting question, and I would say that there are several agencies and several think tanks that have fostered more attentiveness to this issue. So, for example, Dr. Doris Donnelly at John Carroll University is the point person for a number of grants out of the Templeton Foundation for science being taught in seminaries. And we were involved in that in the last 3 years in this school of theology and religious studies at Catholic University. And she's working with a number of seminaries to support how that gets integrated into the curricula. We've not been very good at that, I'll be very honest with you. At some point we've been very, very hesitant about science. We don't need to go back to Galileo problems, but at the same time, I think that the Catholic Church is trying to make decided efforts in that direction under the guidance of Templeton. We at Catholic also had a grant from the Association of American Association of Scientists, and again, for about 3 years we worked on a grant here in curriculum in terms of biblical studies, liturgy and sacrament systematics. I think that's how that's going to go. But in fairness, I want to say that we probably have not been at the cutting edge of this.
Are there any initiatives being undertaken in this regard?
Just starting. I think that one of the challenges, of course, having been a dean here for a while, One of the great challenges is to help the faculty to change their minds, even though they tell us to change their minds, but to help them think that I really need to do this to be a responsible theologian in the 21st century. But that's where the tire hits the road, and we can have programs and projects which are just beginning, to be honest, but I think at the end of the day it's going to be a responsibility of deans and theologians to want to do this. Give an example. I've been approached by the Pontifical Missions Society out of New York to work on curricula for seminaries in Asia and in Africa. Taking Laudato Si and trying to distill this rhetoric about integrating it into a curriculum and then go and help present that. So what I will probably do in the next year or so is to be in Africa for several weeks, and I will pilot this probably in the fall at the Catholic Theological Union in Chicago, because there are many missionary orders, and then likely take this to Africa to do precisely that, because then this is the next step. You have to document then how to implement it.
How can Laudato Si be seen as a document that integrates a number of theological disciplines?
I often say about Laudato Si, it is such a rich document. It's also accessible, but it's only a document that makes any sense if you pray over this document. You don't read this document. If you read it, you'll check it off, nice idea. But if you pray over it and allow oneself to be immersed in the kinds of things the Pope is saying about common good, individualism, Sabbath, worship, biblical prayers of the mystics, if you allow that to happen, I think that will be a way of shaping one's worldview and how one looks at life. But I think that's the ongoing challenge of this document as an enormously rich document in what we call many disciplines, but it's an integral document that I think really would be a profound change only if one really takes it to heart. It should be more than a teaching, it should be a conversion document.
Sounds like it's much more spiritual than necessarily anything else.
Well, it begins with Laudato Si, and in the best sense, in this age of a lot of spirituality talk, it's the best of Catholic spiritualities, plural. And when you put that out there in terms of Bible, liturgy, sacrament, quoting St. Francis, you can't do better than that. And all of this is out of the depth of the Catholic tradition. It is not picking up some contemporary feel-goodism, and certainly one of the document's strong suits is against any kind of individualism or it's all about me. The pronouns are all we, they're all plural. They're very Catholic pronouns. And that's where this document, as a spirituality, is, in the best sense, influenced by theology, scripture, liturgy, and practice.